All right, hello, and welcome to another episode of the Resurgency podcast. I am your host, No, okay, I can't do it anymore. I can't do a cliche introduction. That's just not me. All right. Oh, I'm seeing myself in the camera and the angle, showing a nice shot of my sideburn, my attempt at a sideburn. I want facial hair so bad, but I just have such patchiness, right? Like no hair grows on my chin. And so I just like, okay, the only successful facial hair I can grow is sideburns. And it's not even like real facial hair. It's like what? Is it a continuation of hair? Is it jaw? What are you doing? I don't know. I wish I could just grow a beard or nothing at all. It's like, man, it'd save me time. Okay. So here we are. Um, Not talking about sideburns for the rest of the podcast. Um, Going to be kind of taking a different direction from last podcast. I hope you got a chance to watch the Alien podcast. It was, or listen to it, I should say, and I hope that was entertaining. I hope it kind of took the load off of your mind. You were able to kind of get away and take some stress off, and it was certainly a fun podcast for me to do to get a little dressed up and whatnot. So I hope you enjoyed that. If you, I'd still want to hear from you. So if you haven't listened to it, go listen to it and go give me comments. Do you think aliens exist? Have you had encounters with unexplained phenomenon? I want to hear it, and let's continue the conversation. So to almost do the exact opposite of the theme of last podcast, we're going to take a look at something that I think really really needs to be addressed. And my very small podcast is going to scratch the surface in addressing that. So, in hopes that the few people who do listen can spread this. Yes, today we're going to be talking about a reality that faces us and a reality of life that we all have to live with. And it's almost the opposite of life, and that is death. I have a number of reasons why I think we should talk about it, but the main thing I'm getting at is I think today's society is desensitized and then also scared and ignorant of death. And I speak of this mainly in spiritual terms, right? I guess I don't know if there's any other ways to think about it. But yeah, mainly in spiritual terms. And the way I've seen different folks react to death and to think about it has been quite interesting. I think like for older folks, they don't really have an issue with death, or at least thinking about death, right? Because the time is near, and they think about it, and maybe they're really scared. That that reaction is warranted for folks. Maybe they're like, okay, you know what, like this really sucks, but there's absolutely nothing I can do about it. So this is just what's going to happen to me soon, and they just kind of accept it in a way, but they don't welcome it. And I think others are prepared for it, and they know what's going to happen to them after they pass away, and they await the day that they can live on to eternity. And so I don't think it's much of a problem for older folks because it stares at them in the face like way more plainly than it does say younger people. Even more like middle-aged adults, I don't think it's much of a problem, because from what I've seen, right, I'm only 20 years old, obviously, but from what I've seen of how adults who are in their say 40s and 50s kind of react to death around them is different than how younger folks do it. And something that I think spurs that is when adults get to that age, they start to see people around them pass away from like a sudden heart attack or a sudden disease or illness, or I mean even like a cancer or something like that, and they're like, hey, that guy or that lady was, they seemed healthy, but then also, wait, hold on, they're actually around my age. And it makes you pause. It's like, man, like that's actually a possibility for me. And then maybe that spurs the thought. And that's what I'm getting at, is it's not like we have to dwell on it. It's not like my part of my thesis of this podcast is we need to constantly reflect and meditate on our deaths. No, that's not at all. All I'm saying is, if we have never analyzed within ourselves, within our worldview, what is going to happen to us, if anything, after we die, then I think that is one of the most dangerous forms of ignorance that there is. And I wouldn't say it's necessarily willful ignorance, although I think in many cases it can be. But yeah, I think it's very dangerous to not consider the means of, or I should say the possibilities that are out there after we pass on. And I say this mainly to target folks in my generation, right? I can't really speak, I don't know, I don't know if people think a little differently who are in their 30s about death, but people who are around my age, I think I could get a much more accurate opinion on them, as I am one, and I am friends with a lot of people who are. Something that I see within my generation is just a lot of like, yeah, it can't happen to me, right? And I think there's really two reasons for that. I think one of them is, right, like as a society, we've become sophisticated enough to where we've been able to curb a lot of the diseases, illnesses, and injuries and things like that that would have otherwise killed people in history. And two, I think another reason why folks around my age don't think about death is because obviously younger people don't die as often. I mean, that is a fact, but reality, it comes down to, well, society pushes on us this weird picture of life's purpose and what we're supposed to do with our lives. They say, all right, you graduate high school, graduate college, trade school, or just go get a job, and this is what you're going to do. And you should chase after something that you love to do, and that's going to be your life. And then you're like, oh yeah, I should strive after what I love to do. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't. I think there's definitely a lot of merit in doing something that you enjoy for your vocation. Of course, yeah, do those things. But to the degree that it's pushed upon us, I think it almost makes people of my generation think like, oh, like, I don't even have the time because I'm so busy trying to get my career and set to maybe think about, oh yeah, what happens if a family emergency happens, or a life-altering disease or injury happens to me, or worse comes to worse, I die. We think, oh, I just kind of put it off for later. And something that comes to mind is in the Gospel of Luke, Jesus is recorded giving a parable. I think it's called the rich fool. And he goes and he says, all right, I've like stored up my barns and I'm comfortable, but now I'm going to make larger barns, and so I can store more wheat, and I can relax, and I can be happy, I can be merry, and then God comes in and says, like, you fool, you've forgotten one thing. I think it says, like, tonight your life is required of you, or basically the moral of the story is like, you've totally gotten so sucked up in your career, in your comfort, in your charity or whatever, that you haven't even considered death, right? And And I think that parable is very, very necessary for our generation because we're also just super distracted by it. I mean, just in the ways of media and also the worldview, the naturalistic worldview. It like it almost tells people there is nothing after death. You are just atoms, and then so people just don't worry about it. It's like, okay, just hope I don't die painfully, right? And yeah, so it's just I don't think it's wise at all, right? And obviously Jesus didn't think it was wise at all to not consider death, to not consider your soul after you die. And I mean, even for young people, because even for someone my age and people around us, like nothing's guaranteed at all. I mean, I could give you a handful of people that I knew who very tragically died before they got to my age. And it's a really sad thing, and it hits us in a way that um, deaths of people from other age groups doesn't quite hit us. I mean, young people dying is just such. I mean, it really is a travesty because we definitely feel like something wasn't made right, and something like it almost feels insulting to our soul or to the morality of how the world should be, right? So this is why I think that we should think more about death and um, at least consider, the possibilities of what's going to come after we pass on. And I think another thing is like just not like taking away the stigma and the taboo of talking about it. You know, like you almost think like you kind of at a situation and then someone brings up, hey, what do you think happens to us after we die? It's like, calm down, weirdo. It's like why do you got to bring that up? And it's not to say that people need to just be talking about it all the time, but it's like I think when we are faced with the reality of death, usually when someone around us is passing on or when the threat of it exists, like, hey, like let's talk about this. Let's try to process this, and let's try to, like, if we're scared of the reality that we're faced with, let's try to address those fears. Um, and I think in some ways we have a little bit this year, right, with coronavirus. Just a lot of people who didn't, or a lot of people who passed away because of it. And the saddest part is, like, it was probably unexpected. Like a lot of these people had underlying conditions, and maybe not so much for the people who were very old, but for the people who were not quite there yet, who passed away, maybe they were thinking like, okay, like I have this issue that would have caused people problems historically, but society today has found ways to manage it, so I can still continue to live a happy and fulfilled life. But then coronavirus comes in and just really takes everything and spirals it out of control to where um, life is taken. And yeah, that's been really sad, and it's a harsh reality to see. And it's like, wow, like life can really be taken at any moment. But I think even before coronavirus, we were faced with this, right? With the death of Kobe Bryant. Um, I think I think one reason, or the biggest reason actually why it was so shocking is not necessarily because he was a legend, but because of the age that he was when he did pass. Like it's always so sad when a legend passes away, right? And then but when they're old, when they're in old age, we think, okay, like, man, that's really sad, and we pray for the family, but I mean, it was probably their time. Their time was coming soon. Like we know that the human body just doesn't hold up at a certain point. And it's like, okay, like that's really sad, but it was going to happen soon. Kobe Bryant, I mean, not in the prime of his career, but in the aspect of typical life in America today, especially for a wealthy person, um, he was in the prime of his life. He was right in the prime, and I mean, even his daughter and the other folks who were on the helicopter with him. I mean, just all people in the primes of their life. Some of which, his daughter still, like we would say, had their life in front of them, and like it was this huge tragedy that really exposed the fragility of life. And yeah, I think that has made me see that our society does have this fear of death, and we want to have distractions, um, and especially, this is probably my biggest call. I'm mainly targeting young people in our generation, right? This is a podcast for Gen Z, and um, you know, I think the hardships of life press on our generation in a way that, um, or we face unique hardships that other generations don't, and then when we get older, we'll face the same types of hardships. But the interesting thing is, at this age, we think we're invincible. We think death is not going to touch us anytime soon. And what do? We have fun. Um, we gotta strive after career. We gotta be the coolest cat in the group. Um, we a lot of young folks, significantly drinking and doing drugs, all to distract and to get high and to. I mean, it's. I wouldn't say it's out of bounds to think that this is a coping mechanism to uh, deal with the harsh realities that um, young folks face. And I think the backdrop of the realities is like, hey, like there's actually an existential issue going on with our life. Like we want our lives to be about something, but then it's like we want our lives to be about something because ultimately death is going to come, and we're kind of scared of that, and so we want to make what we do with our lives meaningful. So death kind of just fits its way in there, and yeah, it's something to consider, something to address, and to take the stigma away. And if you've never like seriously considered the implications of death, where you may go afterwards, I would really encourage you to do that. Um, and of course, I myself, I was actually not long before before I became a Christian, I was faced with the reality of death in ways that I thought were really unfair, and I thought were just didn't make a lot of sense, right? And and I think a lot of that primed me to be more accepting of the gospel. And I think in your worldview, you have to, I think the worldview that you adopt, I would encourage you to check out Christianity first. But in the worldview that you adopt, it has to meet a certain set of standards. Does it meet the uh, seemingly serious suggestion that there is an eternity? What do you mean by that, Trevor? I mean that how come in this life there's nothing that can satisfy us? Right? Why put your life's purpose into money when the economy can tank? Why put your life's purpose into a job when, again, the economy can tank and you could get the elbow, or yeah, I mean you could lose a job, even a job of a lot of prominence for many reasons. Fame, why why make your life about fame when uh, just even the littlest things can take you away? Let's be honest, you could die. Like all of these things, you could die, and why make your whole life's purpose about just having a lot of fun and fulfilling all the desires you want? Well, because you'll probably end up with a disease that will kill you from that, or you'll end up in the wrong crowd and something bad can happen there, or you've just tainted your soul so much to where you don't even recognize yourself. You've just become such an ugly, selfish person, only seeing other people as means to satisfy pleasure. So what on this earth is there to give us our life purpose? I'm still waiting on that. I really thought it out in high school. I thought it out a lot, and I could not figure it out. I'm still young, but I'm going to tell you something. I certainly think that it suggests that there's something beyond this life that will satisfy us completely. And also just the idea of death. I mean, death is just so, it seems so unfair and so insulting. And like the thing that is the thing that's interesting to me is that we feel insulted by it and that it's unfair, and we wish that it should be another way. Why should we wish it should be another way? If this natural world is all that there is, then death is the most natural thing. It is the most natural thing. In fact, it should be something we're not scared of at all. It should be something we should welcome, and it should be, you know, we shouldn't grimace at it at all. But the worldview that you adopt, does it actually address how insulting death is? So, for example, Christianity, I would say, completely addresses the insulting or the unfair nature of death. Why? Because it guarantees eternity. It guarantees heaven. Also guarantees hell. I mean, that's a reality. And I would just exhort you to not just think about death, but then analyze your own worldview. Like if you have a very naturalistic worldview, it will not address the deep desire we have within our hearts to have forever, right? I mean, there's a reason why so many love songs have the word forever in it, right? I think when we experience true love, that's something that we're like, man, I want this forever, man, you know? So that's my thesis, and that's my argument. It's my conclusion. This has just become an academic paper. No, I'm kidding. So I hope you would consider that, and I would really encourage you to start with Christianity. I realize a lot of people who are listening to this are Christians, but if you are a Christian, really think about, you know, I do have eternity guaranteed, right? Heaven is there for me. I've put my trust in Jesus, and there's not going to be any more sin. Heaven is going to be filled with beauty, goodness, truth, joy. All that is to say, heaven is going to be filled with God, right? The best thing. So, you know, how does that make me live today, right? How does that make me live today? Think about that, you know, because I've found the more that I actually dwell on heaven, you know, not dwelling on death, but dwelling on heaven, the more it puts my practices and my life into perspective. It's like, okay, this little thing that I'm worrying about, maybe I shouldn't worry about it, or I shouldn't have worried about it, or you know what, I'm going to go share this good news with some folks, or I'm just going to care about people. I'm going to love people, you know, things like that. I'm going to try to get as many people to go to get to heaven as possible. I'm going to share this good news so they could decide whether they want to accept it or not. So keep your mind on heaven if you are a Christian. All right, I'm going to shift something very different. I want to talk about a few things today. Just a couple things, actually. There was this article that was published a few weeks back that I thought was really interesting, and I'd really like to talk about it just because of the the election coming up. I'm not going to get very political, but just kind of thinking about Christianity, politics, the president, of course. Um, I don't think I will offend anyone, but I don't know. If it happens, it happens. Let's see. So I'm reading in the Atlantic this interesting story titled "Trump Secretly Mocks His Christian Supporters." Right? A lot of evangelicals are like totally on the Trump train, supporting Donald Trump. And then I think the aim of this piece is to like Trump is mocking you evangelicals and why are you supporting him and things like that. But it just all it really shows is just how out of step and just diluted the media tends to be about evangelicals and how evangelicals think. Um, so, reading from this article, if you just Google "The Atlantic Trump mocks Christians," it'll be the first thing that pops up. Um, so, here we are. 2015, Donald Trump beckoned Michael Cohen, his longtime confidant and personal attorney into his office. Trump was brandishing a printout of an article about an Atlanta-based megachurch pastor trying to raise $60 million from his flock to buy a private jet. Trump knew the preacher personally. Creflo Dollar had been among a group of evangelical figures who visited him in 2011 while he was first exploring a presidential bid. Trump had reverently bowed his head in prayer with the pastors that laid hands on him. Now he was gleefully reciting the impious details of Dollar's quest for a Gulfstream G650. Trump called this a scam, and Trump also said that this guy is full of, you get it, and he said, quote, "They're all hustlers." And it says the president's alliance with religious conservatives has long been promised on the contention that he takes them seriously, while Democrats hold them in disdain. In speeches and interviews, Trump routinely lavishes praise on conservative Christians, casting himself as their champion. So here we see in the article where they're going to say, Donald Trump appears to do this, but he actually does this. And that comparison is completely wrong. And I will point that out in a minute. Also shows how Trump said, "My administration will never stop fighting for Americans of faith." Then go down, it says, "But in private, many of Trump's comments about religion are marked by cynicism and contempt." Let's see. It's talking about how he ridicules and mocks doctrines of evangelicalism, and it's, yeah, it goes on, and then let's see, I'm trying to find the next part that I think is really interesting. Oh yeah, so here's another thing. So it helped that Trump, so just to kind of get you caught up where I'm reading, it basically talks about how a lot of these preachers would come out and endorse Donald Trump, but a lot of these preachers were actually prosperity gospel preachers, aka false gospel preachers. So it says it helped that Trump seemed to feel a kinship with prosperity preachers, often evincing a game recognizes game appreciation for their hustle. The former campaign advisor recalled showing his boss a YouTube video of the Israeli televangelist Benny Hinn performing, quote, faith healings, while Trump laughed at the spectacle and muttered, "Man, that's some racket." On another occasion, the advisor told me Trump expressed awe at Joel Osteen's media empire, particularly the viewership of his televised sermons. Also says Trump was completely familiar with the business dealings of the leadership in many prosperity gospel churches. Yeah, so you could go on to read it. That's basically the theme of the whole thing. Now look, there's really two issues with this article that it just completely does not like it makes these mistakes because it misses the point of how evangelicals think. So the first one is any serious born again biblical Christian. I hate that I have to even say that, but it should just be any Christian. But nowadays the term just gets so muddied. Any born again biblical Christian would have the exact same reactions to folks like Creflo Dollar and Joel Osteen and Benny Hinn. These people are heretics. They're charlatans. They preach a false gospel. If you have not seen any of the stuff that they do, you don't have to go looking for it. But I would just encourage you to check out there's a film on Netflix called the the American Gospel, right? That's what it's called, American Gospel. American Gospel, Christ Alone. That's the full name. And evangelical biblical Christians just take apart the whole prosperity message. And a lot of the same preachers that you just heard me list off and the same article listed off are talked about. And these people, they're swindlers. I mean, they just con people out of their money. And it's like, okay, maybe I'm being a little harsh with calling these people out. It's like, no, I really don't think so, because if you read scripture, false teachers are called out. I mean, I know especially like in, let's see, First Timothy and Second Timothy, and also I just the other day I was reading Third John. You know, that one of those tiny little books in the Bible that people forget is there. I'm kind of guilty of that myself, but I was reading that, and he called out a false teacher, like, by name. Like, I think there's actual warrant for calling out false teachers. I mean, there is warning not to judge them, right? Not to judge what's in their heart, because we pray for these people that they could come to see the error of their ways and repent and actually lead people to the gospel. So it's not like we're judging them in that way, in the way that God would, right? I think there's warning against that, but calling out the people how we see it, it's like, okay, like these people are false gospel preachers, and so, like, it's just interesting that the author of this article thinks that, like, actual Christians would take issue with that. It's like, okay, have you seen some of these faith quote faith healings that Benny Hinn puts on? Like, they're a racket. I mean, you should see the stuff that goes on, and I really strongly urge you to check out that film American Gospel, because it just shows you that these faith healings, they're wrong, they're fake, and they're just a money scheme. So that's why Christians wouldn't actually take any offense at Trump saying these things about these people. It's like, yeah, okay. Moving on. Another reason why I don't think that this article actually will have the effect that it does, or that it intends, is evangelicals who support Trump totally understand that he's not, like, what you might say a biblical Christian. Is he born again? We don't know. We can't judge him on that. We can see how he acts. Evidence would suggest that maybe he's not. He definitely does not live and speak in ways that Christians would affirm or support. And I mean, there's even been times where he's just come out plainly. Like, there's an interview where they're talking with him about the Bible, and he totally dodges the questions. They're just asking him, like, what's your favorite book in the Bible? And he's like, oh, the Bible's personal to me. I don't like to discuss it. And then it's like, okay, are you an Old Testament guy or a New Testament guy? He's like, well, I like both. It's like, okay, like any person who actually has an understanding of their Bible, they would have some sort of an answer. I mean, I would hope. Even if it's not, oh, I don't have a favorite book, but, oh man, like every time I read Romans, man, it hits me, like something like that. Like, Anyways, that's just an example. Evangelicals know that he's not an exemplar of the born again Christian faith, and why do evangelicals still accept him? And it's because he's not against them. He has governed um, much more pro life, and he's implemented legislation that has been very beneficial to religious institutions. And also, I mean, think about the other party, okay? Think about the Democratic Party. Now, this is when I'm going to start maybe getting into some warm water, maybe hot water, but okay. You look at the Democratic Party and ideologues of this party, people who really hold the leftist ideology and espouse it. What do they say? They call Christianity a religion of hate, right? Think of, I don't know if you've ever seen any of the targeting or the shots taken at Chris Pratt. Chris Pratt is, it seems like he keeps it somewhat private, but it seems like he goes to a legitimate biblical, theologically conservative church, and that's what he practices. That's what he believes. I know like if you follow him on Instagram, he definitely isn't shy about saying like his belief in God and praying and reading the Bible, which is great. I'm just such a fan of that. But whenever something pops up with him, people will target him like, oh, he follows a church of hate, right? And then who are the preachers and teachers in Christianity that don't get called out by leftist ideology? It's the people who preach a prosperity gospel who will never call you out on on your sin, or it's a watered down, lukewarm version of the gospel where it only talks about the love of God, but it's like, okay, um, Jesus came for a reason, and that's to save us of our sin. Like, don't be scared of the S word, right? It's those people, the people who aren't actually going to address the true issues in society. And so that's why evangelicals, like, they're like, okay, this guy's not an exemplar of our faith, but he's not going against it. And think about it too, like, what institution has been significantly silenced because of coronavirus restrictions? That's been religious institutions. Think of King Cuomo over in New York. Think of all the things that he's done. He and de Blasio have threatened churches, saying that they will shut them down permanently if they keep opening up and going against guidelines. California has had very strict religious um, um, crackdowns. And I mean, also, like, when Newsom came out and said, like, oh, you can't sing in church. It's like, okay, Christianity is the only religion that sings in the way it does. So who are you really going after there? Why don't you just say it? And Trump could have used. I legitimately think that he could have used this coronavirus crisis to leverage a lot of power. I don't think he did that. I don't think he did that. And I think if a way he could have leveraged that power is to go against religious institutions, and he hasn't done that. I mean, I know, I think either a personal lawyer or a lawyer associated with the campaign has been there to help out John MacArthur, the preacher who in Southern California has refused to close his church down because of the ridiculous guidelines. So, interesting. Just that's just kind of shows that society is just, the world just, it just really affirms what the Bible already teaches, and it's that the world just does not understand uh, Christianity, true biblical Christianity. Um, so that was a good little discussion. Hopefully that changed your mind on a few things. Um, so now I want to close with a question to you, something that I've been thinking about recently. Um, I'm kind of all over the place. None of these topics really relate, but I've been thinking about, for whatever reason, I don't know. Maybe there's a reason the Lord put this on my mind, but as it would stand, I've been thinking about what does it mean to share the gospel with people who are mentally handicapped? What does that look like? And it makes me ask a lot of questions. It's like, what happened? Like, is there a certain mental capacity that you have to quote, be saved, right? To understand the gospel? Um, you know, it, if if not, then how? Then by what means are those folks saved? And then, yeah, and then also it's like, and this I don't think anybody has the answer to except for God. But like, if there is like a minimum amount of like mental capacity, and I don't even know if I'm using this phrase wrong. I really apologize if I'm speaking with incorrect terminology with mentally handicapped people. Um, but what I'm trying to get at is, what does ministry look like to them? Because all people need the gospel, and I would include that, of course, like, yeah, mentally handicapped people need the gospel. We want to see them saved. They're people that God puts in our lives. They are individuals, and they are capable of not just receiving love, but giving love. And, like, what does that look like? So my question to you is, to any viewers, listeners, if you've had any experience actually doing ministry with mentally handicapped people, I'd really love to uh, hear what your experience has been. What's some things that you've learned? What's some ways that you go about thinking about this topic? And um, maybe what's been some difficulties? You don't have to get very very deep with me at all. It's not what I'm asking, but or maybe someone. I realize this podcast doesn't reach a lot of people, so I may not actually reach someone who has been in ministry with mentally handicapped people. But if you know someone who has, maybe you have an idea of what their experience has been like. Um, I'd really love to hear and to learn more about that. Um, I guess just out of curiosity, but I mean, I guess the one thing I can default back to is that God is going to treat them in the most loving way, because right, God is love, as 1 John 4 says. Um, so that's one thing I can confidently say. Anything beyond that, um, like actually ministering to these folks, I can't really say. So I'm open that up to you. Like I said, I like this podcast to be a discussion, not just a one-way discussion. I'd like to hear the voices of the listeners and make actually a significant part of the time devoted to discussion. And with that, I will close by saying thank you for listening. Hope that I've changed your mind on a few things, made you think about things a little bit more seriously. And um, if you have any questions that you'd like me to address, I'm not going to guarantee that I'm going to answer them. But if you have questions, comments, just something that you'd like to talk about on the show, yeah, send them my way. You can comment. I realize a lot of the people who listen to this actually have a personal means of reaching out to me, so you're more than welcome to use that. Yeah, let's get a conversation, a discussion going, not just me speaking here. All right, it's been a treat, and oh shoot, while I still have you, stay on. I'm going to be, for those of you listening from Barstow, where I am from allegedly. Uh, I'm going to be hosting and putting on a talk on the problem of evil. Now, this will be in November. I'm looking at it looks like probably the second weekend of November. I still got school and work to deal with, so I got to, juggle that. But probably first or second weekend of November. It'll be on one of the Saturdays. I will post another podcast within the next week, and I will have a date stamped down, and you'll start to see me posting this on social media. So if you've ever wondered, hey, Christians say God is all good, and I look at this world and it is not that. Why? Right? That's the simplest way that you could think about it. If you've ever wondered that, please come to the talk. Not to say that I'm going to specifically address why certain evil has happened in the world, but just in general, a way that we can think about it, and why I believe Christianity actually deals with the problem of evil better than any other worldview. And also, I'm going to share with you a little bit of the reason why I thought the problem of evil was actually the best argument against Christianity, and why I now no longer think that. And I actually think that Christianity deals with the problem best. Probably going to be an outdoor venue. Don't really know if I'm going to be personally hosting it or if we're going to do it at a park. That's TBD. But just want to put this in your mind. If you know people, Christians, Barstonians who are Christians, if you know people who just they need the gospel, this could be a really good kind of shoehorn into getting them to really consider the gospel and to consider Christianity. So let's get the word out. I'm excited for it. I think it'll be great, and I hope to see you there. And with that, I will close. Thank you so much for listening. Take it easy, and I will see you in the next podcast. All right. Goodbye.